Hello, I'm Shanna Kramer from Creatively Uncorked, and today we are going to be working with watercolor. Watercolor is a new offering for Creatively Uncorked. We've been teaching acrylic painting classes since 2014, and watercolor is something that I've been a little bit afraid to get into just because it is a little bit more challenging of a medium. Not a little, it's a lot more challenging. And I've had a lot of requests for it over the years, and what I always tell people is that once I figure out how to teach a watercolor class in a way like our regular classes, that they can go home at the end of the night with a painting that they're happy with, then I'll start offering watercolor classes. Finally, years later, I've figured out a way to do that. So in my process of figuring out how to do that, I've done a lot of research. I've looked into all different kinds of paints, I've looked into brushes, I've basically ordered every kind of a pan watercolor I could get my hands on, tested each of them, took notes, and as an end result, I've decided to go with Prang. Prang watercolors are better than student grade, far more cost effective than artist grade, and they work very, very well for what we're doing. They work really well for classes. There's a white, there's a black, plus you get a wide variety of colors. These are half pans that come out, can be replaced, can be traded. They have the colors written in so you know what to reorder or if you'd like to order something else. So I'm happy with this choice. With the paper though, you can get cheap student grade watercolor paper, but don't. Just if you're going to invest in any part of watercolor painting, invest in the paper. The paper just makes all of the difference in the world. In this case, I'm using Strathmore paper. It's meant to be cold pressed, but it's a little bit smooth for my taste. I like a little bit rougher paper. I prefer Arches cold press, but I'm working with Strathmore today. One thing that I do like about this paper is that you can tape it down, and then when you peel the tape off again, it won't stick to the paper. It'll come off cleanly. I like to tape the paper down about halfway into the tape. Press it down firmly. This is going to leave a nice border. You can paint all up to your edges. The paint shouldn't go under the tape, and it's going to leave a nice wet clean border. See that? Comes right off. And this is just basic Scotch tape here, masking tape. If you want to get a little more fancy about it, you can go get artist tape, which is going to be about $9 a roll versus $2 a roll here. Does it work better? Yes. Is it necessary? Yeah. It is if you're using really cheap paper, but why get cheap paper and expensive paint? So I'd rather do it this way. Okay, so now I've got my paper on my board, and these boards you can just pick up. You can paint on them if you like, or you can tape your paper to them if you like. So in this case, I'm just going to do some boho feathers, I'm calling it. Couple of nice swoops, some nice feather shapes, about 5 or so. And don't forget the beads. Boho things always have beads. You're going to have beads hanging here. Don't go overboard on the detail. You want to leave yourself a little bit of freedom when you're painting. I know this isn't really meant to be like a paint by number. I know a lot of people really like to have all their detail in the sketches, but I really prefer to make my detail with the paint. A few more beads in there. Okay, so I think that's good enough of a sketch, and then we're ready to go to paint. Brushes, I'm not talking a lot about brushes. This is the brush that came with the paints, so I'll use it. Otherwise, I just have these brushes that are just nice and simple. They're made for watercolor or acrylic. I haven't used them a lot, so we'll see how they work today. Aside from that, we're going to have our water and our paper towel. So we're going to keep it nice and simple now as far as the supplies go. I'm going to turn my paint around a little bit sideways there. The reason I'm doing this is because I can get to my water quickly, get to my paint quickly, and I'll decide now what colors I'm using. Just going to kind of dampen some colors here. Always a good way to get started. Let's see, is it a violet? Maybe I don't want brown. I might try the green. Okay, so there I'm just adding a little bit of water to the colors that I plan to use, just to kind of activate them. These are all dry paints that we're using. So I'll let that soak in for a minute while I'm deciding what colors I'm going to paint on here. This brush might be a bit big. I think I'll go with a nice blue to green over here. And by blue, I actually kind of mean turquoise because it's my favorite color. See, and now that's maybe needs to be a little bit darker. Ooh, nice. So I'm not filling in every little space, just the spaces I feel like filling in. I'll take a nice light green, oh, maybe a little more green than that. But I want it to be nice and thin and watery. There we go, so now they can blend together. Oh, that's nice. A little bit more green. And some of these color blends, try just a touch of yellow and see if I can brighten it up in there. A little more yellow. There we go. Gonna leave it at that and move on to the next one. I think I'm going to try a little bit smaller brush this time. I have this, I'm going to go from a yellow to a red. I have just a touch of water on this little brush. So I'll just dampen the paper a little bit first in this case. Okay, and I'll start with my lightest color. Get a nice yellow right up at the top. Touch of orange, because I don't want it to be such a harsh transition. A little more water in that transition. And watercolors are always going to dry less bold than what you see here. The colors will lighten and be a little bit more faded. So they're never going to be quite as bold as when you originally paint them. In some cases that's sad. In this case, wow, that was a powerful orange. So I'm okay with it. There we go, now we'll get that red. Nice red blend. There we are. With the beads, you can get kind of a three-dimensional looking bead just by leaving the shadow or leaving the highlight white. That's the thing about watercolor, kind of opposite of acrylic. You always leave the whites white and you paint the darks dark. So it's sort of backward to my way of thinking as a longtime acrylic painter. There, maybe I want this one to be orange too. There we go, so I'm just leaving the highlights. Okay, so now I've got orange, I've got blue. Let's try a nice purple. All right. Okay, bigger feather, I'm gonna go back to the bigger brush. That little brush is nice for having a lot of control, but having a lot of control defeats the purpose of watercolor, I kind of feel like. With watercolor, you have to let it do its thing. You don't want to control it too much. I mean, sure, some, but watch it flow, let it go. Watch this. See? See how those colors just flow into each other? How beautiful that is? Very nice. I might even try maybe even a little bit of blue. We'll see how that looks. Not so bad, but I'm kind of liking these purples better. So I'll go back to that. If you want to leave an area light, just don't paint that area. If you're blending colors, maybe you want to do that out here in the wells instead. Always a good idea. Instead of dirtying up your pans, you want to work in the wells. One question you'll get as a beginning watercolor teacher is how much water do you use? a lot, use a lot more than paint. One of the struggles is when people have never seen watercolor before, they're trying to use it at full strength, which is the reason I recommend using pans to teach instead of tube watercolor. I tried teaching last time with tube watercolor, and it was a little bit of a struggle because even though, I was describing how much water to add and how to use it, people were still trying to use the paint full strength, and that's just not what it's meant for. Okay, so that paint got a little bit heavy. There. Pick up a little bit more water in it, get a little bit lighter and cleaner and fluffier. And maybe we have some really feathery feathers. There we go. So that's not so bad. A little bit heavy, a little bit dark. Try to lighten up a few areas. And you can always come back and darken. There's another thing that's really important, an important difference between student grade paper and professional paper. With student grade paper, you can't lift that color back out again. It's going to destroy the paper if you do. With professional paper, you can come back and you can lift out a little bit of the paint once it's dry, just by dampening it and picking it up with a paper towel. And that's something that'll be hard to do otherwise. There. Yeah, I kind of like that magenta color in here with the orange. A little bit of red down here by this feather. Let's see, what other color can we do today? How about a nice, we haven't done any solid greens yet. Let's do that. Okay, now I'm switching to the paintbrush that came with this paint palette. Pick up some yellow in that. Try and keep it toned down a little. Okay, and you can do multiple layers on these feathers if you'd like to. We can add a lot of detail. We can add zigzags, we can add stripes, we can add spots, but we don't have to do that all in the first run. We can definitely have layers and have colors. Let's see, I think I'd like a little more warmer colors on here now. I think I'll go with a nice orange. I don't really have an orange yet. There, I'll let that blend and be happy. Oh, that's much prettier. Trying not to be too deliberate with this, with the direction of the feathers. I want it to do its own thing. And look at all that purple blended into the yellow. Just beautiful. Here's where we can start adding spots of different colors. Now this paint isn't quite dry, so it's blending just a little. Okay, we'll go into some blues. I'll add some spots in here with the blues. I'll take some nice fringy yellows. Just a touch more here. Bring a little more detail into this. I like that green. If it gets too heavy, just pick it back up. Okay, so if you maybe wanted to add a little bit more depth to some of these, we can take on a little bit darker color. So maybe I want to take on a darker purple in here, for example. And I have this kind of a reddish purple that's, I think, is going to go with it nicely. So try not to stick your hand in the wet paint. Too much there. Just a tiny little bit of paint at a time. There, now we'll get into a little bit more of a bluer purple for this side. Okay, we'll go over the next one, and this is where we're going to get a much darker purple to add our lines. I think I got a little green in there too, but trying to stick to the purple ranges here. Let's go with a little more green in there. On this side, let's try some orange. Give it a little bit of color. Much better. Yep, much brighter. Just little pops of yellow here and there can really bring some life into a painting. Let's see, for this one, I think I'll stick to the bluer, more turquoises. All right, I think I'm going to call this one done pretty soon. I mean, I know it's definitely could go a lot farther than it is, but at the same time, I don't want to do it to death. I mean, I know these colors are fading, but I still, I'm going to try and stop myself from overworking it. I kind of just want to brighten everything up just a touch. See if I can't just get a little more color popping into here.